But a terrible change came over our stepfather about this time. Instead of making friends and exchanging visits with our neighbors, he shut himself up in his house and seldom came out to save to indulge in ferocious quarrels with whoever might cross his path. So now she was explaining, right, things to the person, to Sherlock Holmes. She said that a very terrible change came in our father. Now he stopped socializing and he started making friends, and he just exchanged visits. Like, even if somebody comes, he never used to pay attention to them. And he just indulged in ferocious means dangerous, quarrels with the neighbors or whosoever comes into his path. He had no friends at all save the wandering gypsies. So what is the meaning of gypsies? He was only friends with gypsies and vagabonds. Gypsies is a group of people who travel from place to place rather than living in one place. So he was just friends with them, the people who are just came and went like this. And he would give these vagabonds leave to encamp upon the family estate and would accept in return the hospitality of their tents, wandering away with them sometimes for weeks on end. So who are vagabonds? Vagabonds are the homeless people who wander from place to place. So he was just a little bit closer to vagabonds and these gypsies, and if sometimes he himself used to go for weeks to wander with these gypsies. He has a passion also for Indian animals, which are sent over to him by a correspondent. What is the meaning of correspondent? A friend who exchanged letters with him, like in India. The friend was in India and he had developed a strong bond for Indian animals. And he has at this moment a cheetah and a baboon which wander freely over his grounds. So there were two pets he was having. Dr. Roylott was having two pets, and the two pets were a cheetah and a baboon. You can imagine from what I say that my poor sister Julia and I had no great pleasure in our lives. Julia was but 30 at the time of her death, and yet her hair had already begun to whiten, even as mine has. So Helen said, like, she talked further about Julia, that Julia was only 30 years of age when she died. Only 30 years when she died, and her hair had already started turning grey at that time, and like mine had started in my age now. She died. Okay, your sister is dead then? She died just 2 years ago, and it is of her death that I wish to speak to you. So here Helen Stoner is telling the actual reason why she wants to speak to Sherlock Holmes. That my sister's death is the actual reason I came here to meet you. She died 2 years back. You can understand that, living the life which I have described, we were little likely to see anyone of our own age and position. We had, however, an aunt who lives near Harrow, and we were occasionally allowed to pay short visits at her house. So what she says, like, we were not allowed, these two sisters, Helen and Julia, were not allowed to meet anyone. But yes, there was this aunt who lives near Harrow. Harrow is a place who lives near Harrow, and we were allowed occasionally, sometimes, to go and visit our aunt. So Julia went there at Christmas 2 years ago, before her death. 2 years ago she died, no? Before her death she went to aunt's house at Christmas and met there a major of Marines to whom she became engaged. And there she engaged, like she got into engagement with a Marine person, the Navy person, right? The head of them. My stepfather learned of the engagement when my sister returned and offered no objection to the marriage, but within a fortnight of the day which had been fixed for the wedding, the terrible event occurred which has deprived me of my only companion. So what she says, my father, when she returned back, she got engaged at aunt's house, and when my aunt came back, Sorry, when Julia came back from my aunt's house, father, he put up no objection on this engagement. He was fine with this. But just during the period of a fortnight is a period of 14 days, 2 weeks or 14 days, she died. Sherlock Holmes had been leaning back in his chair. Leaning back in his chair means he was sitting relaxedly and he was listening to what Helen Stoner was saying. Closed and his head sunk in a cushion, but he opened his lids now and glanced across at his visitor. He opened his eyes and he looked at the lady who was sitting in the front, Helen Stoner. "Pray be precise as to details," said he. He said, tell me more minutely. Tell me each and every detail, very precisely. It is easy for me to be so, for every event of that dreadful time is seared into my memory. She said, it is very easy for me to give you all the details, because that dreadful event, that dangerous, that bad, that sorrowful event is seared into my memory, into my memory, like everything is inside my memory. Seared into means I remember everything very, very clearly. The manor house is, as I have already said, very old, and only one wing is now inhabited. So what house they are calling as manor house? They are calling manor house that the house that was 200-year-old and now they are living in it. That house. So a manor house is a house which is very large and it is at the countryside, not in the middle somewhere. The bedrooms in this wing are on the ground floor, the sitting rooms being in the central block of the buildings. Of these bedrooms, the first is Dr. Roylett's, and the second is my sister's, and the third my own. So she was explaining how that house is being made, how is that building. So I'll explain you giving one example. You see our school's corridor, right? For example, we have 3 rooms in that side, we have 3 rooms in one row. So it is like Awesome, Blossom and Florence, for example, right? So the bedrooms were like this. First was of Dr. Roylett's, second was Julia's bedroom, and third was Helen Stoner's bedroom. There is no communication between them, but they all open out in the same corridor. So there is no communication between the rooms, but they all open in the same corridor. Now you understood? You imagine the corridor of our school. All the 3 rooms have no communication with each other. We don't have windows in between the rooms to communicate. We have windows outside, the lawn side, right? And the rooms open in the corridor. That fatal night, Dr. Roylett had gone to his room early, though we knew that he had not retired to rest, for my sister was troubled by the smell of the strong Indian cigars which it was his custom to smoke. So now she is telling about that particular night, what happened. That fatal night, fatal means that very dreadly night, that the very bad thing happened at that night, Julia died. So that night, Dr. Roylett had gone into his room very early, but he was not sleeping because the smell of Indian cigars, the smell of smoking cigars was coming out from the room. So it means he was woke up, he was not sleeping. She left her room and therefore came into mine. Whose room? Julia left her room and came into Helen Stoner's room, where she sat for some time chatting about her approaching wedding. The 2 sisters were having a chat about the wedding, Julia's wedding. At 11 o'clock she rose to leave me, but she paused at the door and looked back. So at 11 at night, she rose up and she went up to the door to leave and to sleep in her own room, but she paused. She stopped and looked back. "Tell me, Helen," said she, "have you ever heard anyone whistle in the dead of the night?" "Never," said I. "I suppose that you could not possibly whistle yourself in your sleep." So this was the conversation the 2 sisters had with each other. Like Julia asked, "Do you hear a whistle at night?" She said, "No, maybe you whistle only in your sleep." "Certainly not. But why?" "Because during the last few nights," turn pages, "I have always, about 3 in the morning, heard a low clear whistle." So she, about 3 a.m. in the morning, from last few days, she was hearing a very low and clear whistling sound. So what was it?